Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me because it's a great honor to speak in this School of Law. I'm not a lawyer, unfortunately. I would wish I would be, but I worked for many years, as you heard, because I'm still diplomat, but taking some time off of my duties, and I'm here not in my capacity as a diplomat, but more like somebody who is working for the NGO who is protecting the refugees. But I worked a lot, many years with the international organization, so I was able to somehow learn a little bit about the international law. So Massimo was very ambitious, saying that I can answer the question why the members of Almighty God, of the Church of Almighty God, are not accepted as refugees. More or less, it's an open question to all of us. Why? And my presentation today is more about try to show you the arguments that these people, they should be accepted as refugees, because clearly they are persecuted in China. Clearly they are called beyond the law. So, and as you remember, it was in the previous presentations mentioned the Criminal Code of China, Article 300, where it's clearly said that Xinjiang is the they should be persecuted. If they are caught, so they will be put in prison for 3 or 7 years or more into prison. So it's a clear persecution. And even further, that these people, they are not only the persecuted, because persecution is still, in a way, it might be mild persecution, right? So that you are not able completely to practice your faith, but we have quite many examples of the people who were even tortured, because they are destroyed for life, and they carried very deep trauma to this very day. So the arguments for the members of the Church of Almighty God is, first of all, those people, they are not migrants. So they are not seeking jobs. They are not seeking the financial assistance, because it's very important that these people, they live in a very close community and they help each other. So there are even here, you see some people who are the brothers and sisters of that group. So for them is the question of the protection. And the membership is very, very easy to define, because they are so close to each other. They keep in touch, in particular those who flee the China. So they really stay in touch all the time. They help each other. So, but the context, as you understand, and all of you know, the context right now is very unfavorable, because we see what is happening in Europe, and all this bad discourse that is against the refugees. And even the media very often is involved in the bad of fake news, because the people who flee, in particular in Europe, they are not, all of them that we see, the images, they are not refugees. Most of them, they are illegal migrants who just pay the money for the human traffickers with the aim to cross the borders and enter Europe. And some of them pretending to be refugees, some of them, they are refugees. So it's very difficult situation. And then there is another problem that all of us, and I believe in Australia is the same, we have right now, is that far right parties, they are slowly becoming more and more strong. And their discourse, somehow, they reach people, and kind of radicalization of the society is taking place. So the process is slow. We are more or less perhaps at the beginning or in the middle of the process. So, and in this context, it's very difficult, and in particular, seeing the images from Europe, it's very difficult to find for the authorities to really to distinguish who is who and give the protection to people who really need the protection. And as you already saw from the previous presentations, that the members of the Church of Almighty God, they really need protection because they will be persecuted. So the situation right now is that only 3 countries, they don't have the major problems to get the refugee status, is the United States, Canada, and Sweden. Unfortunately, in other countries like South Korea, many European countries, is very difficult for them to get the status, and most of them, they are rejected. On the grounds on many reasons. First of all, authorities very often, they don't recognize that they are persecuted, that this group is really persecuted. Sometimes the argument is that that is not a religion. And so far we don't have in France, there are a few people who they were put in jail, but most of the cases, they are still, at least, but at the same time, these people, they live in a permanent fear and insecurity. So, and my aim today is to try to to remind the definitions of international law and the countries we signed the conventions. So we abide by the international norms, and I believe it's a very good place here is to remind these documents and definitions which should be really implemented, and people should be granted the refugee status. So first of all is who is a refugee, because we have international refugee law, entire set of the document, right? So then here you see clearly that definition of who is the refugee. And as you see in the definition, a refugee is a person who is outside his or her own country owing for fear of persecution on protected grounds. And protected grounds, I appreciate very much your introduction today, is that religion or even larger, because I always prefer the freedom of consciousness or freedom of belief, because it's not important what we believe, is we have the right, it's the inherent right to believe in what we believe. So then religion is very much part of the protected ground. So religion, as I mentioned, so that they always use this, because the scholars, like Massimo Trevina, they try to define what is religion, to defend their religion, but in fact, it's not even that is not important. If they are persecuted because of their beliefs, it's already, there is a persecution and there is a protected ground. So, and in my understanding of the concept is atheism is also included. So as you see, United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I believe it's and it's now we are celebrating 70 years for this very important declaration, is that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, consciousness, and religion. And what is really very important for me, and I believe it's always underlined in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, that is an individual right. So we are not defending religion. We are not really defending the dogma or defending it's individual right. We defend person's right to believe and profess what they have. And then there is, in the same declaration, we have the Article 14, where everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries as a for protection. So the origins of international refugee law is everything started just after the Second World War, when the 60 million refugees were in Europe, and then we started to create norms defining and looking for it. So for this reason, in 1950 was created United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. And then we also created in 1951 the convention relating to the status of refugee. And because the first document was limited to European geography of Europe, in 1967 we have the protocol which now extends the scope, is relating to the status of refugees. But being lawyers, you know very well, better than me, that very often in the conventions is not enough. We need interpretation and etc. So in 2004, UNHCR prepared the guidelines where we have a lot of help how to interpret certain aspects for the in considering the refugee questions. So it's, as we well know, and believe it now, right now, when you look around the world, this is really the trends they're taking in many countries. So there is a clear connection. If in a country there is a lack of democracy, lack of rule of law, is a natural way to violations of human rights and freedoms. So China is the case, Russia is the case, Turkey is the case. So when there are violations of human rights and freedoms, certainly the intolerance starts to rise. And then another level is discrimination. And then it's persecution and even might be a torture. And I believe in the case of the Church of Almighty God, is exactly we have this tendency of spiraling down slowly into the situation that is very dangerous. So that is the reminder of the persecution. That persecution is the systematic mistreatment of an individual or group by another individual or group. The most common forms are religious persecution, as we see, race and political persecution. So non-refoulement, so that is humanitarian law, international humanitarian law, that states should be very careful and not return the people who might be persecuted in their country. So, as I mentioned, in some countries there is, for instance, the authorities when they analyze the cases, is that sometimes there are doubts that perhaps the Church of Almighty God is not exactly the religion, or people, they are not practicing or religious enough. That's if you are a leader, so then perhaps the refugee status will be granted. But if you are not a leader, so you don't have the right. So in the case of the members of the Church of Almighty God, is that these people, not all of them, can prove that they were persecuted, for instance, personally. But for instance, the case in the situation in Australia, specifically, is that people, they apply for the refugee status, but only few got the refugee status because they were able to prove they were tortured and persecuted personally. But my argument is that what about those and they received the information that, for instance, tomorrow they will be arrested. So they are not persecuted yet because they fled before they were arrested. And the law, Criminal Code, Article 300 says that if they will be caught, they will be arrested. So, and there is even one more important detail, is that even around the countries, in some places, you have the banners encouraging people to denounce the members of Church of Almighty God, meaning with reward, because for the leaders, I don't remember the numbers, is bigger reward, and for the simple members is the smaller reward. So it's a clear basis of persecution. So when my presentation was to encourage you as lawyers to remember these arguments and not forget the people who really need imminent protection. Thank you so much.